Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is William. This is Man Cave Mean It, and it has been way too long since we've talked. I have been very, very busy in the man cave, just doing things that need to get done. Just things that have put aside, from what I really want to do in here, and that is build the bookcase and get the freaking movies up on the shelf. All right, but speaking of, I wanted to do this video as a starting point before I pull all the movies out, put them on the shelf. And where did this all start? I want to talk about what got me into collecting, what caused my hiatus, and what brought me back. So we're going to start from the top. So I grew up in the 90s, and sure enough, we visited the movie, the Blockbuster, the Hollywood Video, at least once a week. Very often we checked it out. We rented a lot of movies, and then I would ask for, my favorite movies for Christmas, for my birthday. We had a very small collection of VHS. Well, we had a decent size of VHS, and then eventually we got rid of most of the VHS and went to DVD, and we had a few DVDs, and there was a bunch of movies that my brother and I, revisited and watched over and over and over and over again. And so I always, we always had movies to watch. We always had physical media in my childhood house. And when I finally moved out, Netflix has been around, with the whole like mailing in or mailing in stuff, and Blockbuster and Hollywood Video. They were still around. They were still kicking. And I don't know really what caused us to kind of like slow down a little bit with our, buying physical media. We had cable, so we watched a lot of movies on cable as well. But again, still had physical media at an early age. But that didn't really start my collecting or my want to collect physical media. I also had video games growing up. I guess you can say I would collect those, but I really never. I collected Pokemon cards too, um, in the '90s, but that didn't really go as far as really the first generation. But anyways, putting that aside, so let's move into moving out. Okay, so I moved out, got my own small apartment, and before that, I was working at my first job, which was Chick-fil-A in the mall. And I befriended my manager at the time, and he was a cool guy. He invited, people that we worked with to his house and whatnot just to kick it. And he had a massive, massive movie collection. And I thought it was freaking awesome. He had a small apartment, but like right next to the kitchen, into his bedroom, into the living room, just nothing but DVDs. This is before the Blu-ray time, but this is nothing but DVDs. And most of them were horror DVDs. But I was looking at his collection, I'm like, wow, I've wanted to see that. I wanted to see that. I wanted to see that. And I started renting movies from him. It was almost like he had his own Blockbuster, which I thought was super, super cool. And I wasn't the only one. You know, there were other people that he was friends with that also rented movies from him. He had like a little notebook, and he like wrote down what movie it was, who borrowed it, and he would just scratch it out whenever it was returned. And I thought that was awesome, you know, and so that really fueled my want to collect what movies I want, what movies I love, because there's several that I knew I loved that we didn't own in my childhood house, you know. And so that started, that started my fire. We're gonna double back a little bit. That started fire right before I moved out. Okay. And you know, broke high schooler, all my money that I was making from Chick-fil-A went into, like a savings account for my car and other, expenses. So I didn't really have a lot of money to spend on stuff that I wanted. And then I was still learning, you know, how to deal with money, you know. But one thing that I did do is I collected all my coins, all my coins from my purchases. I always put in this, collect, jar or whatever you want to call it. And that was free money to me, you know. And what I would do is I would go to the coin star, at the grocery store. That now as an older person, I knew that that was a huge ripoff because it took like 30% of your money. But anyways, I would cash it in. I would get 25, $30, and I would go to my local Blockbuster that sold pre-rented movies, and I would grab like four or five, and that kind of started off my own personal collection. I think right before I moved out, I had maybe about five or six movies, like I had right next to my old TV. That's my personal collection, and I don't remember what they were. I do remember which one was one of them was, and it was 28 Days Later. That was one of my first ones that I bought because I remember I love zombie movies. I don't know what the significance of why I wanted to buy that one as one of my first movies in my collection. Maybe it was just there, I don't know. And so that's how I started that. Now let's move back into when I moved out. So I moved out and I was not ready to move out. I'm going to cut a long story short. I was not ready to move out, and I moved out with my girlfriend at the time. And I still was working at Chick-fil-A. I was not going to school. I had already graduated high school. I was not going to college. And I was pretty much just barely getting by. I did not have money for internet. I did not have a car. I didn't have, the most necessities for a form of entertainment. And so that doubled down my renting movies from my old manager because he also lived in the same apartment complex that I just moved into. And so that kind of fueled that. And then that, with no form of entertainment, no cable, no internet, movies, my physical media was my entertainment. You know, that's where, I'll get home from work, I'll pop in a movie. That movie was done, I pop in another one. That was my form of entertainment because I didn't have anything else. And so, again, not not learning how to deal with money, I ran into a lot of mistakes, but we're not going to go into that. And so, without a car, I visited Redbox all the time, and there was a GameStop within a 15-minute walk from my apartment complex, and that was a time when GameStop was still selling movies, but they were clearancing them out. And so I bought a bunch of their clearance movies over time. Well, we'd go there, paycheck, go to GameStop, paycheck, go to GameStop, buy some movies, to the point that I cleaned out most of what I wanted from them before they finally got rid of them all of them. So then, once that was gone, it was the red box, and then whatever I got for Christmas money, whatever I got for birthday money, I'll go to Target because there's a Target at my mall, and I'll buy physical media from Target. You know, Target would sell a lot of movies for $5, so that added to my collection quite a bit. Now let's jump from all that and going into now. I live by myself with a much nicer apartment. I have a better job. I'm better with money, and the collecting bug was still strong for me. And so I continued to buy physical media for a long time. And I still bought movies from Blockbuster, pre-owned movies from Blockbuster. And then when my two local Blockbusters decided to close and clearance everything, they started out with 50%, then it went up to 70%, 90%, and I just started buying all the Blockbuster rentals I wanted, which was a big boost to my collection. Now let's jump all the way down to I met my wife. I was at a dead end job working retail. She's like, you need something better for yourself. And I'm going back to college. And now I put a stop on buying physical media for the most part because now I'm working retail. I'm about to go to college. I'm going to have to quit this retail job. So every single penny I was earning, I was putting to the side because I know I'm about to quit and I'm about to focus on college. And that's where my hiatus started. Um, for the most part. So then I quit, went to college, moved to another apartment. I still bought physical media, but not at the level I was because I'm a lot more conscious with my money. You know, I'm going to school. I have a job that's not as good as the one I had before. It's still a retail job, but I'm in school, you know, so I'm focusing on school. And a lot of my money and a lot of my saved money is going to trying to live this way as long as I can to finish school. And I got to the point to where that money ran out and I moved in to my girlfriend at the time, which is now my wife, parents' house, and that was the complete stop. That was the complete stop to buying physical media. I packed, you know, at the time leading up to this, my physical media was always on the shelves for display, always on the shelves. And I boxed it all up, moved into her house, her parents' house, stopped buying physical media, and then fast forward now to having a better job out of college, you know, actually doing something with my career. And my wife now and I move out and buy our own house. My movies are still in boxes, and now we have our own house, right? The plan was to convert that garage into my man cave, so I could put my movies back out and have a nice space. That garage needed a lot of work. And now we have a baby on the way. I want y'all to know that I'm not complaining. Throughout this whole video in the making, I'm not complaining at all. Not complaining at all. So now, baby on the way, it's time to focus on getting the house ready for a baby. It's also time to focus on building up my career. And that's what we focused on for a long time. And then we got baby number 2. And a little bit after that, I was like, all right, now let's focus on the garage a little bit. Let's try and clean this up and start making this a man cave. Again, that garage needed a lot of work. The one thing that really was not good to have that garage as a man cave, it's really strange. I live down here in Texas, right outside of Houston, and they had their dryer, or we had our dryer inside the house, but it was the exhaust or the hot air was dumping directly into the garage. So the garage got very hot, and the setting sun would beat down on that garage door. So it's not a good place to set up a man cave. And that house is very small. That house was 1,600 square feet, give or take. And so there's really no other space for me to have a man cave. And there's really no other space to put up a bookcase for all those movies, especially with 2 little babies running around. Which they weren't babies at the time when I'm talking about this, but they were little. But now, let's jump into my baby's a little bit older, and we moved to a much bigger house. and we moved into this space here. Now this space had more space. It had this garage, but the garage needed a little bit of work. Not a lot, not a lot at all. And it had plans, and that's what I've been working on, all this time. And so when when I was at the old house, I was buying physical media, but not a lot, And whatever I bought went straight to the tote, that the other movies are in. But I want to say, right when we moved here, yes, it was right when we moved here, I found Whatnot, and Whatnot really fueled my collecting habits. Like it jump started my collecting habits, because I remember back in the day, I was buying movies pre-owned from Blockbuster for $7.99, $10.99 a piece, And then when I was buying from Target and GameStop, I'm buying them for like $5 a piece. They had the $5 bins at Walmart. I was buying them there as well. And when I got on Whatnot, I'm like, holy crap. We're buying movies for $1 a piece for DVDs and $2 a piece for Blu-rays? That is cheap. That is crazy cheap. And I went nuts. I swear I went nuts. I was buying movies here and there and there, and movies there and there. I think when I started buying movies from Whatnot, I had about 450 movies in my collection. And now I'm close to 700. And I have slowed down I haven't bought a movie from Whatnot in at least 2 months, I would think. Because the shipping got out of hand. The shipping costs got out of hand. But I've been still, then I was hitting up the Goodwills again, for those, and I was finding like different places to buy physical media now. And so now we're here. We got an empty bookcase behind me. I have 3 boxes full right here. And a lot of these movies have not seen the light of day in at least 10 years, I would think. So, guys, that's my collecting journey. And the next time you see me, these shelves can be full.